I got myself an old Lenovo ThinkStation S30 and installed Windows on it. That worked fine. But what I really wanted was Linux, and it wouldn't boot. And I couldn't make it boot from an internal drive. It boots from a USB stick, lets me install Linux on an internal drive, but then that new installation refuses to boot. It says operating system not found. Spent almost 2 days playing with BIOS settings and never found the answer. And even put the SSD where I'd installed the Linux on. I've tried several different versions, of course, different distros. This SSD, which is missing because I took it out, and I connected it via an adapter to a USB port at the back of the machine, and still it refused to boot. This has a Xeon processor. So then I booted from a USB stick, which is the one I would normally use to install Linux in the first place. That worked fine, of course, and took a look at what was on this drive, and that looked fine as well. It has a bootable partition on it, which we can see here using gparted, the Linux utility, because this is Linux Ubuntu, which I booted first of all from the USB stick in order to fix that drive, and now that it's fixed, it's running from that SSD, which I'm going to put back internally, and hopefully I think it will still work. What I had to do, having booted from a USB stick into Linux, was then to look at the SSD in what would normally be the internal drive, and looking at the system partition, EFI system partition here is FAT32, and it's marked as bootable ESP, those flags, and that's what was refusing to boot. There was no way I could make it boot. In the end, in desperation, because I thought, well, I don't care what I do to it, because it doesn't work anyway, I wondered what this option does here, called New UUID. I'm not an expert here, and comes up with a big warning about if you change the UUID, you might invalidate your Windows product activation key. Well, I don't think I need one of those for Linux, and this drive had previously been used in a Windows computer. I tried other drives as well, hard drives and SSDs. None of them would boot, but of course at some point they'd all been in a Windows machine, and I'd reformatted them several times, played around with Linux, and to no avail, no success. So I thought, well, what the heck, let's just try changing the UUID on the drive that refuses to boot. I'm not going to do it on this one because it works now. When you click OK, it says, oh, changing to a random UUID, which I did. And let's press escape here. After I did that, the machine was able to boot from that SSD. So it means that even after formatting the SSD, which normally would go in this slot that's empty on the computer, even after formatting it with Linux and messing around and installing a Linux distribution on it, it still had some information stored on it from Windows in the form of a UUID, which was what was causing the problem, I think. So having cleared that and set a random one, and I've now managed to boot from it as an external USB drive, what I'm going to do, using a phone here, is I'm going to put that drive back into the machine as an internal drive, and I expect it will boot. Let's see what happens. Well, for people who are observant, you might notice my t-shirt changed color. That's because it's 24 hours later. I thought I'd fix the problem, and I hadn't. It still didn't work. The hard drive with Linux installed on it, an SSD, boots in other machines. I tried it, no problem at all. Put it into this ThinkStation here, and this not found, no operating system, as usual. So I gave up. Normally I don't give up with things, and I've learned sometimes you just have to give up after 3 days with something like that, but it still bugged me. This morning I had a new idea, and I thought, how about putting the SSD into a laptop, which has an easy SSD hard drive port to access, installing Linux on it, which of course worked straight away and it was bootable, take the SSD out, put it into this ThinkStation, and as you can see, of course it booted, oops, there's my hand, it booted straight away, and it works fine with Linux Mint. Bootable. The problem was, when installing into this machine with an internal SSD from a USB stick. Everything appears to function, go ahead as normal, but then it doesn't actually make a bootable hard drive. Where is the hard drive? This SSD here. Now it works. The one underneath, SanDisk one, has got Windows on it. That always worked. Windows managed to install properly, but installing in this ThinkStation S30, for some reason it managed to always install a drive, including a hard drive. I installed Linux on a hard drive, same problem, and afterwards operating system not found and it couldn't boot. So the problem is something to do with the hardware in this computer, which when you use it to create a bootable internal drive, it renders it unbootable. So the answer is put it in a laptop, do it there, make it work, and then put the hard drive back in here and it works fine. I don't quite understand why yet. I don't think I want to investigate that because it's a lot of work. Now I know all I need to do is use a different machine and then swap drives over. So it works finally after probably 3.5 days of fooling around. A lot of taking drives in and out and USB sticks and reinstalling and messing around with BIOS settings. I've been through everything. Secure boot is not something that can be switched off on this computer, probably because it doesn't actually exist on this ThinkStation. There's no secure boot option in the BIOS. I learned a lot of other things like Intel's remote management tools. I discovered finally it works. Has a NVIDIA graphics card in it, which is actually the NVIDIA Quadro 2000, which you can't see the writing of. That's interesting. And that needs a proprietary driver, which I've installed very easily. And it's getting 40 frames per second on this fish tank with one lonely fish there. This is webglsamples.org. It's good for testing graphics cards. Under Windows, it actually manages 60 frames per second. But with Linux Mint, we've got 40 to increase the number of fish to 5,000. Then we're down to 13 frames per second. So it doesn't really hold up so well, but I'm not into gaming and graphics, so that's not a problem. Anyway, so the answer is learn when you should give up, but on the other hand, don't always give up, because sometimes it is possible to find a solution after you sleep on it for a night or two, and then you come up with the answer. I'm filming this on a mobile phone in case you haven't guessed. So success, finally, to enjoy, and I thought I'd given up, and sometimes it's when you actually do give up that you realize how to proceed, and then you're successful again. So the answer is never give up. Let's see what the next video is going to be about. Oh, thank you for watching. If you like it, subscribe, press the like button below. Thank you.